What's up, Internet? My name is Attack, and this is my Raw Reactions video for August the 31st of 2015, where I talk about what happened during Monday Night Raw and play some 2K15 Universe Mode matches. Not much longer now, and these will be 2K16 matches, but we're not quite there yet. That game's out at the end of October. So we're going to join this match. We're going to play as the most unfortunate Bad News Barrett, and whatever else, and just, mess around and talk about Raw. So, Monday Night Raw, or, as some might call it, the continuing SummerSlam rerun, yet again. And that, to me, is frustrating, because I feel like, at least with the big 4 pay-per-views every year, that those should be, breaking points. Like, you finish a bunch of your storylines at SummerSlam, at Survivor Series, at the Rumble, at Mania, obviously Mania, and then you start new ones. And granted, we did, not necessarily at SummerSlam, but, obviously there's SummerSlam and the Raw after SummerSlam. So obviously we started this thing with Sting at the Raw after SummerSlam, and that's great. It's something new, it's something we haven't done yet. It's going to be Sting versus Seth Rollins at the pay-per-view, and say what you want about Sting being, 53, and being and having a WWE record of 0-1, that's something different. We have the match we have not seen ever, so I can certainly applaud it for that. Whether or not that match ends up being any good, who knows? But be that as it may, Sting came out first thing to cut a promo. Now, the ongoing theme of this evening was everybody just kind of putting over Triple H as just, the be-all, end-all, no one is as good as Triple H, and that... So, say what you will about Vince when Vince was running the show, etc., etc. Vince, how many guys did Vince put over as, they got... Vince got his comeuppance more often than not. And how many guys are doing that to Triple H? So when Vince passes away, like, how often is that going to happen with Triple H? Like, obviously he did it for Daniel Bryan, and then, look what happened to Daniel Bryan. So, that's unfortunate accident, etc., etc. Where are you going, Wade Barrett? That's not what I pressed. Anyway, so that was kind of the running theme in the evening was, oh, Triple H is the best, and no one's as good as Triple H. And I'm like, yeah, but he's the part-time guy at best, and should not be an active competitor anymore. Anyway, SummerSlam repeats on this episode of Raw. We got Ziggler versus Rusev again, and obviously they're trying to build to a mixed tag, and that's fine. But the order that they get there is not necessarily the most exciting thing in the world. Calm down there, Randy Orton. Having those guys fight again and having more interference from Summer Rae and Lana runs on. I'm not hitting the button to go outside of the ring. What? Video game, stop. There we go. I was hitting the wrong button. I wanted to run. Anyway, that match ends with a DQ because, of course, it did. And then we get to the backstage shenanigans with Lana and Summer Rae sneaking into Dolph Ziggler's dressing room and seeing him naked and all sort of absolute, the usual soap opera stuff that you're going to do with this kind of stuff. And that's fine, I didn't mind that, but, like, the logic of having faces be stupid is, like, never quite jived well with me. For me, wrestling is at its best when it makes sense. When things that are happening are logical and make sense in wrestling, that is some of the best storytelling. It's not going to work. I'm outside the ring. That's some of the best storytelling in wrestling. So, the fact that Lana was so mad at Dolph Ziggler, when had she spent, a minute or so watching the tape back of that backstage interview of Summer Rae sneaking into the locker room, where clearly she was sneaking into the locker room, just creeping in, clearly. And had she watched that for, 2 seconds, she would have understood that that's what has happened and not be mad at Dolph. But this is wrestling, so that didn't happen. We have to continue to further our storyline, etc., etc. So that just kind of was dumb. Anyway, moving on. The Divas Revolution now has now competed in a Beat the Clock challenge for the #1 contendership for the Divas title. Now, this is problematic. I mean, look, I think that they should certainly allow the Divas to compete in all the kinds of matches you can have for the men. That's fine. That's great. That's progress. However, specifically as it relates to the Beat the Clock challenge, you're having the Divas have the same length of matches that they used to have before the Revolution, and one of the primary things that the Revolution was all about was, hey, we want longer matches. So having a Beat the Clock challenge, not really conducive to having longer matches considering what the Beat the Clock challenge is. Personally, I think that they should have had a tournament. That would have been great. But, you know, we've certainly got enough weeks of Raws and SmackDowns to make a tournament happen with those Divas. But that's not what happened. Now, having Nikki Bella, who is the champion, put up what is vastly inferior to Santino's Honkameter, which I love the Honkameter. It was great. Vastly inferior to that, and I will tell you why. Because that clock expires like a week before Night of Champions. So why come out and flaunt it when you're going to pass that 14 days before you even have your title defense at Night of Champions? What's the point? Unless you book a title defense, a different one, right before that clock expires and somebody runs in, it's already a foregone conclusion that she's going to break AJ Lee's record, so why even put up a clock to mention it? Like, that shit to me is like, yeah, it's going to happen. We all know it's going to happen. She's had like an Ambrose run of not ever defending the goddamn belt. And people are saying, well, she's hurt or she's, you know, had some nagging injuries, whatever. And obviously they're so, we've discussed that they are so petty that they want to break AJ Lee's record, you know, etc., etc. I get that. But, like, having that clock is just not significant in any way. And we continue spinning our wheels. We continue having a champion who said, oh, wins and losses don't matter, I'm the champion. Like, no, this is wrestling. Like, yes, it's fake, but you need to have the suspension of disbelief. You need to pretend that wins and losses matter, because otherwise, what are you even doing? You need to pretend that having a title match is going to get you more money. Like, these things are supposed to be significant, so don't tell me, as a fan, they aren't significant, because then, why the hell should I care that you're even having a match in the first place? So there's that. Be Del Rio, I don't care. And that moves us on to the continuance of the SummerSlam rerun, which is The Big Show versus The Ryback, which, funny enough, Lillian Garcia, I guess, was, you know, she occasionally has been known for flubbing her lines, calling Chris Benoit, Chris Jericho, you know, things of that nature, has happened over the years. So she went to go announce the winner and say The Big Show, and she caught herself and said The Ryback, which is what Daniel Bryan always calls Ryback, so I'm like, that's awesome, it's great. But yes, this was an IC belt match. This feud, is apparently still ongoing. That was supposed to be a Battleground, you know, blow-off. There was a staph infection on Ryback, got continued to SummerSlam, and so you had this IC title match between The Big Show and Ryback, and you had Miz on commentary. Apparently, summer never ends, and this shit is just still happening over and over and over again, and it was not a feud I cared about for Battleground. So, we're running into our third pay-per-view now, which is Night of Champions, with this same feud. And it wasn't interesting to begin with, and it's still not interesting. So yeah, we're kind of just spinning our wheels here on this stuff. And speaking of SummerSlam rematches, Cesaro vs. Kevin Owens was the next match. And granted, I like both those guys. I think both those guys are fantastic. But not a match, like, it was probably one of the better matches, if not the best match on Raw. And the ending of the match made sense. And I'm a big proponent in matches and angles making sense. So when Cesaro couldn't get the swing to happen because Owens had been working on his ribs. That made sense. And then he got, his finisher, which, well, obviously, a powerbomb is going to hurt your ribs. That finish made sense. So, ace booking there. Those guys are both excellent wrestlers. But what was the point of having this match outside of, hey, we're going to have these guys fight again? Like, are they going to fight again? Like, there's no point in having them fight at Night of Champions because neither guy is a champion. Granted, Owens should have beaten Cena for that U.S. belt, but that just didn't happen. And, so, again, spinning the wheels. Next match was Ambrose versus Braun Strowman. That guy. The new guy. The big guy. That they have. That is, that obviously, that is a new match. But that is continuing the Bray Wyatt, Roman Reigns, Dean Ambrose, Luke Harper feud from SummerSlam. And continuing the Bray Wyatt, Roman Reigns feud from Battleground. So we are still kind of stuck in this time loop of things happening that I don't necessarily care about. And, does this encourage Ambrose and Reigns to bring in a third guy? Who is that third guy going to be? Obviously, it's not going to be Sting. That was the original rumors. Oh, they're going to bring in Sting. And no, that's not happening. So, is it going to be an NXT guy? Is it going to be an existing guy who's just been off? Or, is even on TV? We don't know. So, you're setting up for another six-man, whether or not you call that thing the Shield or not is kind of inconsequential, I guess. But that is what's been happening. So, we had that match, whatever. Now, actual new things happening, we had the Dudleys versus the New Day, with primetime players on commentary reminding us that obviously they have their rematch clause. So is it going to be primetime players at Night of Champions or not for the tag team titles? And I am continually, I think the New Day is the best thing on the show right now. They are just killing it every week. They are just firing on all cylinders, so I have no complaints about the New Day on this show. Whether or not, the eventuality of when they put that 10th title reign on the Dudleys, that's going to happen. But, the question is when, and the question is where. And whether or not they could have a triple threat match between 3 tag teams at Night of Champions. That could happen. So, that moves us on to the main event, which was Seth Rollins wanted to know where his damn statue was. And was calling out Sting, but not Sting, he got Steph to come out, and then that brought out John Cena, who, surprise, surprise, has a rematch clause for the U.S. title that he lost at SummerSlam, and why you had Rollins acting all shocked about that was weird. Like, obviously he's going to have his rematch clause for his U.S. belt, and Night of Champions is Night of Champions. So I don't know how he thought he wasn't going to have to defend at Night of Champions, when the whole gimmick of that pay-per-view is that you defend every title at Night of Champions. That is how that pay-per-view works. So, you're not going to get away with only defending one belt unless you are going to unify those belts. Obviously, those belts are not unified. So, Seth Rollins has to fight Sting, and he has to fight John Cena at Night of Champions. Does he lose one belt? Does he lose both belts? Does he gain, or does he retain both belts? Those are the interesting questions for Night of Champions, and, which match goes first. You would assume that the U.S. belt goes first. And so, conspicuous by his absence on this episode of Raw, was the Money in the Bank holder, which is Sheamus. Now, do you keep Sheamus off TV for a surprise run-in to cash in at Night of Champions? Do you give Sting the world title for, 5 minutes and then have Sheamus cash in on him? Like, there are a bunch of avenues you could be going down for Night of Champions, and that stuff to me is interesting. But the fact of the matter is, Sting, who is in his 50s, has a world title match. Sting, who has a WWE record of 0-1, has a world title match. That just seems weird, but I could understand if Sting agreed to lose at Mania. It's like, yeah, we'll give you the belt, the big belt, the one you've never had in your career. We'll give you that big belt for, 5 minutes. Or, a week. Something like that. That could happen. But the rest of the show is just SummerSlam repeats. And I was like, no, I want new feuds. I want feuds definitively wrapped up. I want something to happen. That'd be nice. But didn't really get that. So that was my Monday Night Raw reactions for August 31st of 2015. There was some good stuff, but just kind of a lot of boring spinning their wheels stuff. And look, I don't mind having feuds go on if there are compelling things happening within those feuds and not just the same match happening over and over. And perhaps that's too much to ask for the amount of TV that they have on there. But when you're giving me, literally a minute and a half of Sasha Banks, I want to see more longer matches that I know she's capable of on Raw. That'd be nice, but that's just not what we're getting. So, that being said, I am your host, Attack Slug. This has been Raw Reactions, and I will see you next time right here on this channel. And I'm out.